Hey, how you doing? Duff here, and time for another Duff 3D video. Today I am giving a comprehensive overview of my thoughts on the Dagoma Neva. I've now had this printer for 3 months at least, maybe going on 4, I'm not quite sure. But I've done a number of prints on it. I might have done 50 prints, maybe more on it. And I just wanted to give my feedback after that amount of time because it is the least expensive printer in my collection. Well, no, wait, I'm lying. I'm used to saying that, but I forgot that the Ender actually, the Ender kit was only $160, so technically that is the least expensive. But the Dagoma Neva was basically plug and play, ready to go, no assembly required, for $249. So there's a little bit of a difference. So anyways, out of the box, since this was the third printer that I added to my collection, it seemed a little weird. There's a lot of quirks to the Neva. Like the absence of any sort of control button, or I'm sorry, control panel on the front of it. You just basically have this one button here and an SD slot. And there is a USB port over on this side, but it's not used for anything. At least not as far as I know that I've been able to find. And the power cord goes back there. It does not come with a spool holder. One of the first things I printed was this spool holder that I found on Thingiverse. However, I would recommend that you do not use this design. It basically snaps on to the rails here, but what happens over time is it starts to slide down, because when you install this, you have to have, it can't be right against the base plate. If it gets against the base plate, it will interfere with the head, and before you know it, what will happen is one of the magnetic arms will pop off and it'll attach itself to the slide rail. So I actually just got myself, I just bought these table-based spool holders where you just sit the spool on here and just let it spin on the bearings. So I'm going to be removing this actually later tonight, so I won't be using that anymore. So that would be my advice as well. Like if you look at the official recommendations for Neva or pictures of it in action from Dagoma, you'll see that the spool is always like just sitting on the table or something. It's not ever mounted right to the printer frame, and based on my experience, I would not do that either. Alright, the Neva comes with this dumbed down version of Cura, where you have very, very limited control over your settings. And again, that's intentional, I guess, because the printer is definitely targeted towards the newcomer to 3D printing, but it definitely can be frustrating. Your only options over here is you can pick the PLA type, where it can be Polyflex, Philo 3D, Octafiber, Chromatic Wood, Chromatic. As far as infill goes, you only have 3 options: hollow, filling, which is 17%, and reinforced, which is 33%. And as far as your layer thickness, your options are 0.2, 0.15, or 0.1. And I've pretty much I've printed almost everything with the 17% infill and the 0.2 layer thickness, and I've had good results. You can add supports, but I've used supports on the Neva, but not too often. And improving the adhesion surface, I believe, just kind of prints like a brim, which again I don't really have. Like I said, it's not very feature rich. If you've used Cura before, you won't have a problem figuring out how to do things in here. Hold on. I'm just loading an image. Okay. Alright, so there's an image loaded into the Dagoma version of Cura. Once you have the image in there, you can do the standard things: rotate it, scale it, mirror it. But again, your options are limited. It does tell you approximately how long it will take and how much filament it will consume. So that's useful. But like most slicers, you usually find that number is underestimating what it actually will take. The other thing that's kind of weird and quirky about this is the way that you get the image into the Neva. Basically, you take that SD card. I have a dedicated SD card that's used for the Neva, and when you hit this prepare the print button, it looks for an SD card, and it always writes the file out to the SD card with the exact same name. It's like Dagoma.fr or something like that. I don't quite remember right now. It's always the same file name, so it makes it a pain, you know, to try to categorize things. I mean, in theory, you could rename it after you do the print to something that makes sense. But then, if you ever want to print it again, you have to rename it that specific file name, and it can be the only file with that name on the SD card. Because the way that the printer works is, you put the SD card in first, you hit that power button, and then in theory, hands off. It goes from there. Yep. So if I wanted to start a print, I would take my SD card that I just dumped that file on my computer, stick it in, and hit the power button. And what it will do is it'll start going through a initialization sequence first, where it comes down and it touches the plate. One of the nice things about the Neva is there's no leveling required, you know, because it is a stationary build plate. But the head will come down and does a touch test at various places around here to calibrate it before each print. Like this. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the I'm gonna stop the print because I don't really want to print anything right now. I measured more points than I realized. Usually when I'm printing something, I just kind of stick the SD card in and just walk away. So I mean, I have to say, in most situations, it is kind of just, you know, slap the card in and forget it. Alright, so now it's in the spot where it would be heating. It's interesting that it still hasn't aborted the print yet, but this is one way to abort it, I think. When in doubt, pull it out. Alright, so there we go. It'll reset. Since there's no card in there, it's just gonna go to its home position and just kind of sit there. Alright, so let me talk about some of the things that are less than ideal. The Bowden tube on the Neva is very, very long. It starts down here, goes here into the frame, up, all the way up here, all the way down to the head. It's super, super long. And one of the problems that I had a hard time figuring out was why I was getting a lot of jamming and under extruding. And I was when I first started using the Neva, I was using the eSun filament that I've used successfully in my CR10 that I get on Amazon quite a bit, and but I wasn't having great results on Neva with it. Like I said, I'd be getting jamming, and when this thing jams, you know it, because you will hear this extruder start banging all the time as the filament just kind of gets choked in the tube. You hear it bang, bang, bang. It's really loud, really annoying. And the funny thing is even if you're not necessarily having a problem, you're going to still hear banging there whenever you're doing a model that has a lot of retraction. You'll hear the same noise from this extruder. So it's not the best design, and you just kind of learn to live with it. But yeah, the long Bowden tube was a problem for me. And if you go on the Neva site, they will recommend that you use the Polymaker filament, which is very expensive. But I have bought some of that. But what I did prior to doing that was I bought some Hatchbox filament, and I noticed I hadn't really used anything but eSun, but the Hatchbox filament felt more slippery. The outer surface felt like it had less friction than the eSun filament, and I theorized that maybe it would work better in a situation like this where you have a super long Bowden tube. You want the least amount of resistance as possible. So basically, once I switched over to using either Polymaker or Hatchbox filament, I haven't had that problem with under extruding. Because when this thing jams, it's kind of a pain. What you have to do is get the head down to a low position. There's special G code you can download from Dagoma that will put the head in a position where you can work on a jam. It brings the head up to temperature, and then you're supposed to pop the tube out and then press filament in there to clean it. I've used eSun cleaning filament to clean out the head a few times, so yeah, that whole scenario is kind of a pain in the ass with this printer. As far as other negatives go, the I'm not. This is my first Delta printer, so I'm not sure if they're all like this, but all these arms are just held on with magnets, and I don't know. It's like I said, it's kind of a weird design because sometimes in certain situations, this head will get too close to the side rails, and it'll actually get stuck on the side rail, and it'll pop off the print head, and then you got a screwed up print, and that's happened a few times. I'm not sure if all Delta printers use magnetic arms like that, but if they do, maybe it's a common problem, and it's just something you deal with. I'm just trying to think of any other negatives that I've run into with the printer. Not really. The build service has been pretty good. Once in a while I've lost adhesion, but for the most part I really haven't had a bad problem with stuff sticking. I don't have to use rafts typically, and that's worked well. The printer is noisy, like I mentioned. The bang that you'll get from the extruder when it's doing retraction is annoying. Sometimes when the head is going through the calibration, it makes a really disturbing skipping sound sometimes, usually when it's on an edge, and it's kind of weird. The printer generally is noisy and makes some strange sounds, but for the most part it's been working just fine. So okay, so as far as positives, like I mentioned, the bed surface is nice. The printing area is decent. It's more than the Finder, side to side, and it's bigger than my Ender as well. It's kind of weird that you have a circular build area, but it's pretty substantial, and the height lets you build some pretty big things. I printed some of those holiday Christmas trees around the holidays, oddly enough, and this did a good job. And the print quality, I would say, is good. I really haven't noticed any significant problems despite its simplicity. Despite the noise it makes, the print quality is good. Once you work through and you start to understand some of the quirks with the printer, like I said, coming from a more function-rich and feature-rich 3D printer to this took a bit of an adjustment period. But in a way, you kind of start to appreciate it as well, because it is pretty simple. You know, you just go to that dumbed-down slicer, stick your file in here, slap it in the SD card, hit the button, and walk away. It's pretty cool. The filament detection sensor, that's kind of a nice feature. I haven't really had to use it much. I typically make sure I have enough filament before I start a print, but it does work. I know there's been some reports of it being a problem for some people, and a lot of times you can address that problem by just blowing out the sensor with some compressed air. And also the feature to be able to change filament mid-print by tapping on the build plate. It's kind of a weird thing, but it does work. You basically pause the print with this button and tap on the build plate twice with your finger. But it's not exactly an exact science. You're just kind of, well, yeah. I think on the Dagoma site they have some information about what the flashing lights mean, but not nearly enough for me. But again, you just kind of get used to not getting much feedback from the printer and just learn how to work around certain situations. What else can I say about the Neva? Overall, my impression has been good. For the money, to have a printer that you don't have to put together, that can reliably print a wide variety of stuff of a decent build with a decent build volume, it's kind of cool. You know, for the money. I don't know that they're still selling them for $249. I think that was kind of a promotional price. But even if it was $299, I don't know. I'd say it's worth it, especially if you're new to the 3D printing scene. Now, if your ultimate goal is to become like very knowledgeable about 3D printing, I don't know that this will help you much, because it intentionally shields you from a lot of that complexity. But otherwise, yeah, if you're a first-time 3D printer, or you have a kid that's looking to get into 3D printing, this is a pretty simple way to accomplish that. Yeah, overall, my impression of the Neva is positive. It kind of wavered there for a while, especially when I was having all the problems with it under extruding and all that stuff. But like I said, that was basically fixed by changing the type of filament that I feed it. So, yeah. Okay, so that's it. That's it for the Neva. My overall review on it would be thumbs up. All things considered, price, performance, problems, all in all, it's a good unit. And I continue to, or I hope to continue to keep using it on a regular basis to help support my hobby. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them below. If you found this video helpful, please take a second to give it a big thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, I'd appreciate you becoming a subscriber. Look for all kinds of 3D content on this channel. If you're on the Duff Excentrics channel, there's going to be 3D printing and all kinds of other stuff, you know, because I dump everything there. But if you're into 3D printing, just go to the Duff 3D channel on YouTube, which is linked below. So that's it for now. Till next time, Duffman out.